Hi, Andre. You'll tell me when we are co-reading.
Thank you, Chair. I'll tell you. Good morning, Chair. Chair, in terms of the rules, we have more than 1/3 members on the platforms. Others may still join us, Chair, so we may proceed, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Shall I do the roll call, Chair?
Yes, please.
Mr. Mdluli? He's on the platform, Chair. Mr. Chance?
I'm present, thank you.
Mr. Mkutu?
I'm present.
Mr. Tambo? He's on the platform, Chair. And Ms. Yati just joined, so we do correct, Chair, as well. You may proceed, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Andre. I'm sorry about that. My network was giving me a problem, but I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Mdluli.
Thanks.
Present, Andre.
Thank you. Chair, we may proceed, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have two agenda items before us, and I will really request the DG and the DTIC to really assist us. We need to make sure that we can manage time because members also need sufficient time to engage. Thank you very much. Can we get the mover and supporter for the agenda?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder for the move.
I second, Chair.
Thank you very much. The meeting is co-reading. We can proceed. Are there any apologies, Andrew?
Chair, we have apologies from Mr. Langa, Mr. Kigaba, Ms. Schlazer-Webster, Mr. Gama. They're all on oversight visits with the other committees they're serving on, as well as the alternate members, Mr. Mzazani and Mr. Cream, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The briefing today by the ECIC and NEF on their amended or revised APP and the third quarter financial report and non-financial performance for 2024-25 year. The purpose of the meeting is for the committee to receive the briefing from both these institutions on the amended or revised APPs, as well as their third quarter financial and non-financial for 2024. Therefore, oversight of its performance is an extension of Section 5 of Money Bills Amendment and Procedure and Related Matters Act 9 of 2009. This section of the Act
recording in progress
requires that the National Assembly, through its committees, to annually assess the performance of each and every national department over an 18-month period and submit a report of this assessment known as the BRRR. I will now invite, firstly, before I invite, I would want to warmly welcome the newly appointed Director General, Mr. Hamilton, and wish you well in all your endeavors as a portfolio committee. I hope that you will continue to, to work very closely with the committee in ensuring that we do comply with all the laws and the rules of Parliament. Secondly, also take this opportunity to thank Ms. Mabija Thompson for the sterling work she has done since the start of the 7th administration as the acting DG in the department. We remain indebted to the work that you've done, and we wish you well in your new responsibility as you continue where you were as the DDG. And I hope that you'll continue cooperating with the committee. Thank you very much. Over to you, DG, since the minister and the deputy ministers are not here.
Greetings, Chair and committee members, as well as colleagues. Thank you very much, Chair, for the warm words of welcome. And I commit to do all that is within my powers and abilities to work cooperatively with the committee and to ensure that the committee's work is not made unduly difficult or impossible by our own conduct. As you've already indicated, Minister is not here. We apologize for him and his two colleagues. The Minister is in cabinet and I am on the sidelines in support. So I may request to be excused depending on when I am required. But I think my part today primarily is to introduce the matter that you already have spoken to in terms of the purpose of the meeting. We have the CEOs of the entities ready to present both their revised APPs as well as their performance for Q3. And we look forward to interacting and addressing any of the concerns and questions that the committee may have. With your permission, I would like to hand over. I believe we start with the ECIC Chair.
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to hand over to CEO ECIC so that he can then take us through. Thank you very much, Chair, with your permission.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, DG and colleagues from the DTRC and LDF. My name is Gilbert Mapula. I will be taking you through our presentation. I think we can skip the first two slides. Yeah. So I'll be taking you through our 2024-25, APPs. Here on these slides, it just shows our contribution to the economic cluster targets. As a ECA, our role is to promote exports of goods and services, and those activities contribute to the 1 trillion of exports. Then in terms of the cluster, the desired impact that we need to have, that will be reflected in the 55 billion rand exports. Then in terms of our contribution, as I've said, we do contribute to the 55 billion, the cluster target. We are targeting about 670 million in approved transactions per year, which will result in approved 6 billion in exports over the period of the approved transaction. And usually that is an average of between 5 and 7 years, depending on the drawdown profile. Then over the next 5 years, we are looking at, a transaction to the value of about 3.35 billion, which are expected to result in 30 billion in exports over the next 5 years. And out of that, we are looking at generating jobs or facilitating jobs of about 70,000. So those will be the job opportunities that will be contributing over the next 5 years. And we are looking at specific transactions. These are already approved transactions. They just had a number of challenges in terms of implementation. For example, the Mos LNG is one of our biggest transactions. We had approved this transaction in 1920, However, due to the insurgency challenges in Cabo Delgado, that project was stalled, or it was put on ice, or the project declared force majeure event, in order to deal with the insurgency challenges. So we are quite comfortable now that those challenges have been dealt with, and the project is ready to resume. We have spent the last 2 weeks trying to reconfirm the commitment by the South African banks. And also another major thing that wanted to happen was around the US Exim's approval, which came through. So US Exim has approved about $4.7 billion. And that's quite a huge funding that was required. We are now waiting for UKEF, the UK government. They have taken legal advice on whether to pull out or not. Then we're also waiting for the Netherlands ECA to also approve. But all indications are that, all the countries will support. So the document, this transaction have been done. We did amendments last year. So if it resumes tomorrow, it's not gonna take us more than 30 days to put everything, together. And we're expecting about 400 million of the 800 million ticket that we're supporting, to be carved out to South Africans. And that has been already agreed with the EPCM contractor. It's a joint venture of CCSJV and TAPM and Total. So $400 million of goods and services, those will be placed in SA. We have identified some of the suppliers that will be involved. Then we also have the last one, number 4, ExxonMobil. So the two projects, they're kind of one project. They are going to share the onshore facilities. They will have different gas fields. And very interestingly, the very same contractor who has been contracted by Mos LNG has also been contracted by ExxonMobil. So in the last 2 weeks, ExxonMobil, together with the contractors, they've spent a fair amount of time in Mozambique trying to solicit, local suppliers that are likely to provide goods and services. So they've got a component of domestic as well as foreign. So we're expecting ExxonMobil to also do the same round in South Africa to try and identify suppliers that can provide the 300 million of SA exports that we expect to come from this country. And the yellow equipment, this project we should have closed, I think probably before end of February. But due to the challenges that the DRC is facing in the East, that is delayed a bit because the government came back and asked for certain changes to be done to the supply contract, which we have resisted because we wanted the draws to be, the drawdowns to be done by the Ministry of Finance, but the payments made directly to the OEMs. And the reason being that we want South African exporters to be paid directly. If they're providing the yellow equipment, they have to be paid directly. So that was one change that we have resisted. And obviously because we want to ensure that there are exports from SA. Then LMSI Hospital in Zimbabwe, that transaction, we've already done the loan agreement. It's stalled because the Zimbabwean government has gone to the Peace Club to seek for debt forgiveness. So we didn't want to be trapped in a situation where we are likely to face a claim. So in the last 2 weeks, we've had meetings with the contractor, and there's renewed efforts to revive that project. Obviously, there are two things that needs to happen. The contractor needs to revise the costs, and also finalize the identification of the sites where about 22 hospitals or healthcare facilities that will be built. So the sites needs to be identified, and then we can see what are the upfront works, what are the costs, so that we can know that the total debt that's required will be sufficient to fund that. So I'm hoping that in the next 3 weeks, we should be able to resolve the issues, and hopefully in the new year, we will see some traction on that. Next slide. Then in terms of our Q3 performance, year to date, so target 1 involves approved transaction of about 570. That is more our MLT, our large capital projects. As I've said there, we've got a very good pipeline of about $6.6 billion. But most of these transactions, they take a bit of time with the due diligence, to also verify some of the findings that we see from the due diligence. For example, we've got a PGM project in Zimbabwe that we're looking at. For the last 3 years, they've been drilling, trying to reconfirm the reserves. So that work is still continuing until we get satisfied. And also, the PGM sector was hit, by price fluctuations. So now the prices are recovering, and I think we do see an opportunity of closing on that project. Most of the work has been done. We've moved into the documentation side. I'm just giving that as an example. But we are not likely to meet this target, for the end of the year. We only have one transaction approved for about $7.2 million. And then we got a transaction in Angola. It's a water treatment plant that is with. So we've done our assessment, we've written our paper to the board. The only thing that delayed us is that there is a Chinese contractor, the main contractor who will be doing the aggregation. But we want certainty in terms of what are the specific value chains that will be utilized from SA, and who are the suppliers that they're talking to. That work is already underway. We should be able to wrap it up before the end of this week. If it wasn't that, we would have put it through. And that transaction is to the value of about $165 million. Then target number 2, number of approved transactions. So that we can be because already only the one that we've got there. And then value of approved transactions within the sectoral coverage. This is our short term. We've got a number of projects that were approved in last week, to the value of about 155 million rands. So that number will change when we do the final numbers. But currently, we're sitting at $1.44 million. Then in terms of companies benefiting under the Export Passport Program, we're supposed to at least support about 7. So through our ED, the enterprise development and the supplier development, we've got a number of entities that were assisting already for this year. And I think we already have about 9 entities. And those entities have also been pre-qualified for the Export Passport Program. So the Export Passport Program is an initiative amongst ECIC, DTIC, NEF, and ourselves. So we have already shared the database of the entities that we need to support. Some of them, they're coming a number of times from some of the database that we have shared. So I'm hopeful that from our side, we'll be able to meet that target of 7. But obviously, this initiative is big. We want to really deepen our support here. So we want exporters to have a choice of products, insurance, loan funding, non-monetary services that are offered by NEF, including the grant funding. So there's 3 stages of entities that we're looking at. We're looking at the entrance, those that are expiring to enter into export trade, that need to be exposed to training, and DTIC has got a number of interventions, the Global Exporter Fund, and then some of them will be incubated. And then obviously if they grow their capacity, they can move into the stage where they are ready to export. So the second tier will be the entities that are ready to export, but they don't have access to market. So through some of the trade fairs that happens, we're hoping that we will take them along and expose them and also make them so that they can start exporting. And we are already having those entities in our ED program. Then the third tier will be companies that are already exporting that needs to expand their market, that needs working capital, plus the insurance products. So we'll be able to do that. In our case, we have already amended some of our underwriting criteria to, in order to accommodate, the cohorts of beneficiaries that we expect under the Export Passport Program, especially looking at some of the conditions like contribution that we need to see from them, security. So there are a number of those like underwriting criteria that we will relax. Obviously, from our side, we need to also include the banks in this program. That is the next phase that we'll do together with the other partners. So we've got the pre-launch already done, but we're testing the mechanics and the framework that it works and the beneficiaries that we have identified to go through that process. And once we are comfortable that everything is ready, then we can have a bigger launch together with the beneficiaries that we've already assisted. Next slide. Then in terms of maintaining a B score, this one I think we're going to achieve. You know, we do have a tool that we use to track our progress on this. So to date, we've got no reason to believe that we won't be able to meet it. We are going to achieve it. Next slide. Then in terms of the targets that have been highlighted here, a lot of them we're achieving, as you can see there. I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time, but the one that is also very interesting is, you know, the risk maturity levels of the corporation. There, we ran a survey. That survey is currently being run. In fact, it's almost been concluded. In a week or two, we need to get the results and then see where we came out. Then in terms of an increase in equity, I think that I can cover again when I deal with the financials. But you can see, you know, as at the end of the third quarter, we already see achieving about 4%. Then in terms of our cost base on the underwriting activities, there again, you know, we seem to be way below the target. Next slide. Then in terms of the click-through rate, you can clearly see there, we are already achieving, you know, the target from very high. Then in terms of culture entropy, this survey has already been done. We've got the report. We are interacting with the service provider to iron some of, you know, some of the things, and hopefully we can conclude that before the end of this week, so that we can know what the final score is. And then in terms of the external audit, yes, last year we did have some challenges, you know, owing to a number of things. One of the big problems that we've had was the implementation of the new accounting standard, the IFRS 17. So it introduced a lot of changes in terms of how we recognize revenue and expenses. And we went through a lot of trial and tribulations. And the standard does introduce a lot of judgmental issues that do not have precedence. However, we're quite comforted by the fact that the auditors that we have that will be conducting the audit this year are the same auditors that went through the journey with us. So most of those issues have been sorted out and out. Some of them will keep on looking at how we can best improve on them. Next slide. And in terms of the financial performance, so as at the end of the quarter, you know, we have underperformed, you know, by 121 million on our underwriting results, you know, and that performance is also largely due to the discount curve shifting upwards and reducing our present value of the expected future cash flows, which are far in the future. So I'm not going to go through the detail, but at a high level, you know, the standard has introduced a way of recognizing salvages, which we didn't do before. Previously, we'll account for salvages as and when we get them. But now we are required to recognize an asset at fair value, applying a risk adjustment method. And that is very complicated because there are a number of factors that's one needs to look at. And the key one being the probability of realizing those salvages. And now, you know, we've gone through, you know, a series of challenges with the Ghana. We ended up paying claims. You know, the loans need to be restructured. Then we also went through the Paris Club, you know, discussions. We ended up with an MOU, you know, that presented a good deal for government of Ghana, but not for us. So government of Ghana has been able to get a 15-year grace period, and they will repay us in 2013 and in 2040, you know, in bullet installments. So that is way out of our reach. And the interest rate that has been agreed upon is a 3% fixed, which accrues on a yearly basis or 6-monthly basis. And all of these issues, they've got huge impact on our balance sheet. So these are some of the issues that we're trying to deal with, you know, should deal with and address, as part of implementing the standard. Then in terms of net investment income, due to market movements and the high returns generated in the first half of the year, were partially reversed while these are still, included in the budget. Obviously, yeah, our investments are not performing poorly. We have been performing very well, in the first 2 halves of the year. And we still expect some moderate, performance. Obviously, most of our investments are in USD, about $280 million. And then in rands, it's another 2.9 billion. And we've got fund managers that are managing those funds. Then the impact on equity and cash flows, again, here, we've seen an increase on our equity from 8.5 billion in March 2024 to 9.1 billion as end of December. There was an outflow of about 505 million from operation due to a claim that we paid. So these are it's one of the last claims that we paid, on the Ghana portfolio. It was in total, the claim was about $55 million. And then with a piece of insurance that we did for our own experimental purposes. So the net claim that we ended up paying, received the insurance, it was around $42 million. That's what resulted in the loss of, in the 505 million rand that you're seeing there. Then in terms of the non-financials, next slide. So this is our pie chart that represents our portfolio as at end of December 2024. Our biggest exposure is still in Ghana. We still have a big, power plant, sun power. I think the outstanding amount is around $220 million. We've been having discussions in terms of how we manage that risk better. Then Zimbabwe, we've got a project there, InfraLink, and the Zimbola Post, which is working very fantastic. Then we've got the Mozambique at 12.69%. We've got a couple of gas projects there. That's a transmission line that we've supported. Angola at 3.65. There's a hospital that we supported there, if I met. DRC, we've got a small prepaid meter projects that we supported. Lesotho at 230. There's a diamond mine that we supported. We did pay a claim in 22 on that. We are currently trying to restructure the project, even though the prospect does not look good. So there are difficult decisions to be made on that one. But the good things, we have settled that claim. The only small claim that will come is a very small amount of working capital that we provided. Then Republic of Congo, these are some of the airports investments that we supported in Congo and Cote d'Ivoire. Zambia, we also supported a project with Olomode. And Tanzania, it's in the transportation business. There are some trucks and that we've supported there. The next slide. I'm not going to go through this slide because it's related to the pie chart. It just gives you the granular aspects of our portfolio, the nature of the project that are there, and the sectors in which they belong. Then in terms of the impact that we've had, we've got a number of projects that are growing, and the jobs that we've facilitated to date, in total, it will be about 387, 317 are during the construction phase, and 8 are in the operational phase. Thank you. That brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, CEO. You will assist me with a show of hands, Andre?
I will do that, Chair.
Yes. Honorable members, we can now engage with the presentation. Member Chance. I see Member Chance.
Is the only one that's for, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Member Chance.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Mapula for the presentation. I just want to ask a few questions around the business itself and then the financials. From what I can see in your presentation, you're concentrated on a fairly small number of transactions. And the second last slide indicated that that was the case. Very small number of transactions, which potentially inflates your risk, as you would have seen from the outflow of 500 million or so from one project in Ghana, which represents, almost 50% of your total net profit and about 10% of your capital. So I guess the question is, where do you sit in terms of the South African market for export credit insurance? How do you compare with private sector players in terms of your scale? And why would a company come to you to obtain the services that you offer rather than going to a private sector organization? What was the purpose? I'd like to get back to the absolute purpose of why does the DCIC have you as one of their entities? What is your actual raison d'etre? And do you believe that you are achieving the sort of impact and scale that is really going to make an impact? But 379 jobs is not exactly shooting the lights out. So I'd like to know, for example, if you take some of the projects you mentioned, the Mozambique LNG project, $800 million, 400 million rand of exports. What does those exports actually comprise? What are we selling? Who's selling those products to whom? Same with the 300 million Exxon, 308 million yellow equipment. By yellow equipment, does that mean Bell equipment? 154 million exports and so on. So I'd like to get a bit more detail as to what companies, who are your clients, who's actually selling stuff overseas. It also seems to be, if I think about the fact that South Africa's main export market for manufactured goods is SADC countries, that you're not really making inroads into many of those companies. Otherwise, your numbers would be radically different. I'm also just not quite sure about the export passport program. Maybe I missed it, but you mentioned ESD. I couldn't quite figure out what that actually meant. Why was an export passport program customer different from any other customer in your portfolio? Then I'd just like to understand how you calculate your equity, and you want an increase of 5%. What is equity in your terms? I may be a bit ignorant about how insurance companies actually measure equity, but I'd just like to get that, please. And then the very interesting term, culture entropy score. I've never seen that before in a financial presentation. My understanding of entropy is that it's a measure of chaos or order in a system. And please, will you expand on that for me? Then there was a 349 million rand foreign exchange gain, which seems a huge sum of money compared to the budget of 135 million. Can you explain that to us, please? And if that's something which is an anomalous gain? And I think that's about it for me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Chance. Any other contributors?
I don't see any other hands, Chair.
Okay.
Hi, Chair.
Mr. Murray?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one question, and with regards to job creation impact. So the ECIC aims to facilitate 14,000 job opportunities annually, yet only 387 jobs were sustained or created in Q3. So therefore, what explains this shortfall, and how does the ECIC plan to accelerate job creation? That's the only question that I have for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maybe on my side, just if you can further elaborate on the 505 million outflow and the prospect of us recovering from Ghana. I think it's a main issue that we're looking at. And then the second issue, sorry about that. The second issue, it's if you can just explain to the committee how those, when you have work packages as part and parcel of your strategy, how do you identify local companies that get to participate in the mainstream on the other end? I know that you're mentioning that you have some export readiness program and so on, but how do people even get into that particular program so that there is transparency and there is understanding on how we're looking into this issue? The last thing, it would seem as we had observed last time that the risk, Ghana remained a major risk. Why are we so invested in going there, even when we have such problems that are even financially costly to us? If you can just explain those to us. I'm sure members will come in the next round. If not, we will see what to do. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Chair. I will answer the questions. From the first member, I think why do clients prefer to come to ECIC? What is the value proposition that we offer in a nutshell? So, as you know, we are the only ECA in the country, and as an ECA, we play a counter-cyclical role, and our cover that we offer is very key in many respects, and I will illustrate that to you. The risk that we take is not what your private insurers will take. We support some of the large capital projects, especially on the continent, and that require huge capital injection. And then in terms of our value proposition, it's multiple. Through the cover itself, we're able to mobilize financial institutions, to syndicate and provide funding under our cover, to a particular project. And again, we also assist, the host government, in raising funding, where we deal with, sovereign projects. Then again, as an important key element of our coverage, we assist financial institutions to manage their risk. Some of these risks, especially sovereign, they cannot manage them on their own. That's why they offlay that risk to us. And then the value that we also bring in, when transactions get into trouble, apart from paying claims, we are able to negotiate, with the sponsors, to look at restructuring, rescheduling, over the long term, and then we also extend our policy along. However, more importantly, we facilitate exports. Through our coverage, we are able to get exporters, to participate in this, to offer their goods, South African goods and services. Each ECA, they do that for their host countries. And I can tell you there's a lot of competition on the continent. In fact, if I were to count the ECAs on the continent, we are the most prominent ECA, that is funding a whole lot of projects. I mean, some of the projects that I can, just to give as an example, in Mozambique, we supported the Mozal project together with the IDC when the country had just come out of a civil war. And that project served as a catalyst for other projects that happened, including the Sasol, Pandit Tamane gas fields and the Romco pipeline. It came as a result of that, because that transaction set the precedent. And if we didn't do that, that transaction would have happened. And if I remember very well, we did Mozal 1 and Mozal 2, and most of the financing entities at the time, they were very reticent to enter into Mozambique because of the high risk nature of the country. But that project that we supported heavily, both in terms of providing the huge capital that was required, including the interest makeup that we're offering to lower the cost of the funding at the time. And, due to some structuring, on that project, we ended up getting profits because of the differential between the rate that was offered and what we're paying under the IMU scheme. So it was a very good precedent setting. And after that, you've gotten other big projects, not just the Sasol. There are sugar plantations that we supported, in Mozambique. There's also a lot of projects that we did with EDM, the transmission lines, some of the gas-fired power plants that are there, And then one of the biggest projects, which is a jewel in the jungle, is the Lagala corridor. That included the mine. We were not supporting the mine though. The corridor, the rail corridor, which had an anchor tenant, which was the mine, and the port. And the port was a dedicated port in Nampula. It's a deep sea water port that doesn't need dredging. So the anchor tenant was, shipping out coal, both coking coal and the coal that's required for, both cooking and thermal. The coking coal is required, is used by steel mills to manufacture steel. Thermal coal is what gets burnt in power plants. And that project had gone very well. And if we didn't do that support, I don't think Vale and Mitsu would have taken a decision to do it. They were relying on as a government to participate. And we covered about $400 million worth of export. The project was 4.1 billion. And then it was implemented without any problem. And then in less than 2 years, in fact, 18 months into the operational phase, they prepaid the project, the debt, and then we're out of it. And the infrastructure is still there. It can be used. You can build feeder lines that connect some of the landlocked countries, such as Zambia and Zimbabwe. And if we'd done that, maybe the Lobito corridor wouldn't have happened the manner that it happened, because both Zambia and Zimbabwe could get access. Even the DRC could use the Nampula port, and for import and exports. Then other big projects that we've supported, obviously in the energy sector, the Sun Power project in Ghana. We also did the rail, the hospitals there, So those are some of the infrastructure projects that we did, and were very successful. And one of the projects that we did, which was very interesting, we supported Vodacom's investment in Safaricom in Ethiopia. And that was during the height of the civil war. We were there with Mega and the private, insurers, but Mega, they had a cold feet. They didn't want to go, but the reason was because they wanted to do an equity deal through IFC, And after that project was implemented, the wedding parties were called here in SA, and they signed a peace agreement. Very interestingly, we were taken out of that project by Mega. They went there and did an equity deal, which also came with the benefit of the Mega cover. So you can clearly see we do open the markets. Obviously on the continent, there are risks, and you need to be pragmatic about them. When you deal with such situations. And I think as an entity, we've got that experience, and it also borders on the country's ability to intervene, when there are political issues within the country. For example, the Mozambique's post-election violence. And I think there was a big involvement by SA. And that is the diplomatic currency that we also rely on, to do some of these projects. And even some of the ECAs, they will not do deals without ECIC, because they also recognize the influence of government on the continent. So that's why clients believe in us, say, in terms of that. Then you also ask, who are those clients that we deal with in particular? Because we cover loans that are extended to foreign buyers to buy our exports, our primary clients will be the banks. Those are the financing institutions. Those are the clients that we ensure, we deal with them. And there are also exporters and investors. MTN is a classical example. When they ventured into Nigeria, in the early 2000s, during the hype of mobile telephony, And we supported MTN with launching their operations, the investment in Nigeria. And we also followed when they did expansion. But very interestingly, because they were very boyish about the risk, we only covered them for political risk. They didn't want any commercial risk for that matter. And they've done very well in Nigeria. They've been printing money. Then we also did the same in Iran. So that is the type of clients that we deal with. We deal with exporters, we deal with banks, we also deal with investors. And a lot of them, we do engage with them. We do tailor-make our insurance solution to suit their requirements. Then You also asked about who are the exporters that we deal with. You know, very interestingly, when we started the business, I joined ECIC in 2004. So ECIC came into being around 2001, 2002. We were doing a lot of mining transactions, you know, in Zambia, you know, and Zimbabwe, many countries that we looked at. And we were dealing with our construction companies, you know, and we had relationships with your Group 5, your WHO, all the big construction companies that were active on the continent and internationally. You know, we had those associations. We used to meet regularly. But of course, you know, the landscape of our construction industry has changed. You know, and we now find ourselves dealing a lot with international companies that are carrying the projects. For example, the gas projects. This is a new industry in the SAD region, although Sasol has been there for quite some time, but we are assisted by service providers to run the gas upstream and also to operate their plant in Secunda. And they build capacity internally to do that. And that's why they were able to go further investment with QP, Qatar Petroleum. You know, they've got an Oryx plant, you know, one of the LNGs in Qatar. You know, it's a Sasol plant, which is running very efficiently, very well there. So those are some of the exporters that we deal with. But now, obviously, because the landscape has changed a bit, you know, with the Mozambican ones, you know, you've got international construction companies that are specializing in LNG projects, you know, and we're getting a lot of South African companies to getting involved in supplying goods and services. Obviously, you can see the build-up. I mean, there's a lot of associated projects that are coming up, building of, you know, LNG regasification terminals, you know, that provides space for skills that can be harnessed and that can be offered from SA. Richards Bay, there's also a terminal. You're also going to see, you know, gas-fired power plants coming into being. And again, you know, in the petrochemical industry, there's a shift from heavy fuels to gas. So that is going to stimulate a lot. And these are the companies that we're working with to bring those skills, you know, and that's why we're very particular to say to Mozambique, can you put 400 million of exports to SA? And the kind of services that are goods and services that are being provided, some of it will be a steel, you know, so we do need steel because the trains are very specialized, you know, equipment. But, you know, the pipeline, the associated pipeline infrastructure and the regasification plant, you know, it does require a lot of piping and welding. Those are some of the skills that will be coming from SA. You're also talking about security provisions. There's also the provision of temporary shelters, you know, early works, you know, creating of roads, you know, around the site. You know, you're getting South African companies that are there on the ground. Some are also offering catering, you know, and we had a very good, you know, approach, you know, to the Mos LNG as an example. We worked very closely with the DTIC. They created a link. You know, there was a portal where they used to put the work packages that they were valuing to the SA market and invite South African companies to bid for those work packages. So it's the same approach that we'll be following. In fact, in the export undertaking that we've signed with Mos LNG, it's got two components. There are those existing, you know, SA companies that they already have. There will also be new ones that they'll be identifying. So there's a mechanic that we recognize those new work packages in the document. So it's a well thought out document that has got that mechanic of recognizing your exporters. So obviously, you know, the company runs the procurement system. So they've taken us through their process in terms of how they'll be doing that. And we expect ExxonMobil to do the same because the contractor, like I said, is one and the same company. So you're likely to get, hopefully, same suppliers from SA providing goods and services to both projects. Then you talk about our financials and the picture that you said it looks very chaotic. But I've got the CFO to deal with all the financial, you know, issues related to the exchange rate differential. So she will explain that in detail. Then in terms of the job creation impact, Obviously, the job that we've reflected is only for the quarter that has ended, about 389. It's only for the draw. For the year. It's only for the year to date. But if we were to look at because your question was why are we seeing a low value in terms of jobs versus some of the big commitments that we've got? Obviously, these projects, they are quite massive. They are not structured over a year. This project, they go up to, if you close this project within 2 years, you will have done very well. If you close it, the normal duration is around 4 to 5 years. That's the time that we spent on DD and negotiations, because there's too many aspects of the project that needs to be addressed. Obviously, the impact will be seen when there are huge drawdowns, and we expect to see that with Mars LNG. So the reason why you're seeing small numbers, it's a reflection of the activities that we've been embarking on. So obviously, because of the insurgency that I said, we couldn't implement the Mars LNG, so that number couldn't go up. And again, in Ghana, there were 2 projects that stopped following the Ghana fiscal challenges and them declaring a moratorium on repaying debts. That happened in 2022, November. So when they did that, a number of projects stopped and halted disbursements. And some of those projects were the projects that we supported. So we couldn't see the numbers growing up because the disbursement were halted. So it's also a function for the low activity. And this is also due to very tough economic conditions, But if I were to show you Zim borders, you will see that the numbers, historical number, is one of the projects that we closed. The border post between us and Zimbabwe. I mean, the numbers are quite high. You could see that content was overachieved around 76, and even the jobs that were created during construction were quite huge. But because the border post is more digitalized, they are using electronic system to do collections, which has reduced corruption, also increased efficiency in terms of clearing the vehicles that are going through the post, and also the goods, that border post, it's saving our interest. Most of the goods that are going to Zimbabwe is exports or imports from this country to Zimbabwe. So I can show that as an example so that you can see the differences. Then the issue of what explains the debt situation in Ghana. Ghana has gone through a fiscal challenge. Their source of the problem, unfortunately, they didn't address that. Their source of the problem came from the procurement that they did, of the IPPs, to generate power. So they boosted the generation, which was a good thing. They ended up with 5, IPPs. But the problem comes when they did a contract. They sign up to take or pay, which means even if the plant is available, as long as that capacity is there and the plant is ready to dispatch, it keeps on charging for availability charges. So those charges have built up and created massive arrears. I think in a year, they were ramping up to 1.7 billion, and that's quite a sizable number. And over and above that, they still have to pay for the dispatches that were happening. So the entire scheme, in fact, they tried to privatize the distribution, to improve collection rates. But, it was an effort, I wouldn't say in vain, and the reason why I'm saying this is because they have improved collection. But if you look at the data, of ECG, our ECOSCOM equivalent, it's many government entities that are not paying for the power. So government is the one that's contributing to the collapse of the system. But I'm happy that with the debt destruction that has happened, there's renewed effort to liberalize that sector, in terms of making it self-dependent. So the cash waterfall system is being bolstered and is being made transparent. And, last week we had an opportunity of engaging with the Minister of Finance, who also renewed his effort to support the sector, within the fiscal constraint that they have, because they do have the IMF program running up until 2027. So that is the genesis of the challenge, which had snowballed and affected the other areas. So they have to deal with this debt in any way. I mean, currently the areas are sitting at 1.47 billion, and these are new areas. You know, we even had a discussion with IMF because they are supposed to do an assessment of the country to allow them to assess further funding under the IMF bailout and the World Bank, you know, budget support program. So we voiced our opinion in terms of why is IMF not breaking government in making sure that there are no outstanding areas, you know, in the energy sector. And SunPower is a project is affected heavily. We were in discussions to restructure it. And obviously the discussion last week, they were very fruitful in, you know, looking at the complete the restructuring, you know, and giving SunPower a longer period to repay. And again, that will be anchored on government's commitment, you know, to make certain contribution on a monthly basis. So we hope the situation will improve over time. We still have the loans that we paid claims that still needs to be restructured, you know, there. But yeah, the debt situation in Ghana is a worrisome thing. So, Chair, the 505 million outflow is one of the claims that we paid. It's a Tenga-shaped claim. It was one of those, you know, community electrification projects that was done by a South African company. The project was completed, it was working. Obviously, because MIF defaulted on all the facilities, this was caught up and then we ended up paying the claim. But it's part of the claim that we've been reporting to you. The 160 million that we've been saying, 60 or 67 thereabout, it includes this 505. It's just that because of reporting, because we paid the claim in May, so we had to record it because it falls in this financial year anyway. Then in terms of the work packages that you've asked, Chair, I thought I've addressed that question in terms of how these new companies, how the new projects that we're looking at, especially the Mos LNG and Exxon, they will place some of the packages, you know, in South Africa. Even with the Chinese entity that we're dealing with on the water treatment project, that's where the discussion is focused on. You know, we are forcing them to really commit and sign subcontracts arrangements with South African suppliers that they will identify. Obviously, as ECIC, we do not dictate who they need to talk to. You know, it's a question of price and quality of the goods that they want. If they get suitable companies from SA, then they do that. We also insist on, you know, meeting some of our BE requirements. You know, they are willing to do that, and you know, we have to make sure that we enforce our requirements as part of our coverage. Then the Ghana risk, like I said, it's going to remain a risk that needs to be monitored on an ongoing basis. And we are doing the same thing. And we think with the restructuring of SunPower, that will offer us a lot of relief. In fact, it has already done that now. So hopefully we'll continue to manage it, make sure that it doesn't snowball like the other claims that we've paid. I will leave the CFO to deal with the financial issues. Then she can explain, you know, the issues around exchanges, you know, how we calculate our equity, you know, all of those, yeah. CFO.
Thank you, ACO. And good morning, members. So I will be, as the ACO has mentioned, I will be dealing with the remaining questions on the financials. So in terms of the increase in equity, how we calculate that percentage increase is that we take the equity for the current period, which would be December 2024, and then reduce it and calculate the movement, the total movement from the beginning of the year. So we will take the 9.1 billion less the 8.5 billion, and then divide that by the opening balance, which is the 8.5 billion. Then it shows that we have increased our equity by 7%. And then in terms of the foreign exchange movements, these are mainly driven by the differences in the opening balances between what we had budgeted for and what we actually reported during the quarter. And the other factor that also affects that is the actual movement in the exchange rates. So given that ECIC, we have both the US dollar portfolios and the rand portfolios. So when one is looking at our financial statements, the foreign exchange movement there, it is as a result of our rand portfolio, where we would check how the Forex has impacted the balance of that portfolio, because we would need to convert that rand portfolio into US dollars and then back to rands again, which is our presentation currency. So there, the main contributor there, as I've mentioned, it is how the opening balances are moving from month to month and what the exchange rate is for those particular months. So if I may just indicate, for example, what we had anticipated by the end of December, we were expecting that the exchange rate would have increased from the beginning of the year, which is 2024, up until March 2024 up to December 2024. We had anticipated that the exchange rate will appreciate by 5.54%. However, it only appreciated by 1.48%. Hence, you will see that those significant variances that we are reporting on our income statement. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there any follow-up, Member Chance?
The only thing I'd like to say is that it's interesting what the CEO said about the early days where there was lots of construction work going on in Africa. And unfortunately now our construction sector has been completely decimated. Maureen Roberts, Avenge, Basil Reed, they're virtually all disappeared. And it's sad that we can't actually compete at that market anymore. I still didn't get a proper understanding of what this culture entropy is. If you could just please explain that term, culture entropy score. Thank you.
Okay. Over to you, CEO.
So the culture entropy, it's a measure that we look at. We measure a whole range of issues. How we deal with staff issues within the company. Whether are we conflict averse or not. Are staff satisfied? Job-wise, are they getting any satisfaction? We also look at things like monetary rewards. Are staff being paid, fairly or not? How do we handle grievances from staff members? Are we efficient in that? So that survey, it covers a whole range of those topics, and then out of that we can see where we are looking. What are the key areas that we need to focus on? So that has been very helpful. So we do it every 2 years, and then once we get the results, we spend another year or two trying to deal with the issues. Some of it will fit into how we rejig our policies, how we rejig our process to address those concerns.
I'm covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Chance. Let me take this opportunity to thank you. What we normally do, we go back to all these reports as we do our BRRR, as I was explained, where we then prepare our own report. But for now, what we do, we just make recommendations and note the report as presented. And then if there are follow-up questions, we also put them in writing, and then we send them to your entity. So otherwise, we think that there is some improvement in areas, and we're looking forward to see how the Q4 will look like, and fully to be in the mode of implementing the new direction and the new thinking, and where we would like to have as many local companies participating as possible in the spaces that are being created. I can see now that we're moving from construction more towards energy and gas related projects. So we will really take a closer look. One of the things I was just thinking about loudly is how can we have access to some of the local companies that you have assisted and they've located abroad or in the continent, so that we can also get to speak to them, because sometimes we interact with reports and we never know what is the view of the person next door, even what are the issues they have that they might want to raise with us, which might impact on us reviewing any legislation and so on and so on. So I wanted to check that with you. Then from there we're done.
Thanks, Chair, for that. We will definitely avail the database and the contacts of the companies that we've assisted, that we can engage with them. And then they can also tell you whether they're getting good service or not. Yeah, but certainly that information is available.
Thank you very much, CEO and CFO. We really appreciate. Those who want to take tea in the comfort of their offices, they can do so. And then we are getting ready for the next presentation, and we'll just proceed because we're in our comfortable spaces, so it's not like a physical break. But you are welcome. So we can release you, ECIC, or unless you also wanna just pick up, because there might be some other issues of interest here in the NEC, in the NEF that we'll be presenting. I now hand over back to the DG if you're still here, so that you can introduce the next team. Thank you. DTIC, anyone who's still there?
Chair, we are here. Hamilton is here.
Okay.
Yes. Chair had said we hand over to the next presentation, which is from NEF. We have the CEO being Umzi Daimani, who's going to lead that presentation. And with your permission, Chair, I will hand over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you, DG. And greetings to the members of the committee, also the leadership of the DTIC, as well as the colleagues from ECIC. Chair, I am in this meeting, I'm accompanied by one of our board members, Ms. Pilile Mbogazi, the non-executive director at NEF. And I'm also with one of the colleagues, one of the executives for strategy and the portfolio, Mr. Andile Stiman. So, Chair, without wasting time, I'll go straight into our presentation. But just to say as a background that as an organization, there you go. Yes, so what we are going to be talking about, Chair, is our the APP, and we'll also talk about our performance up until Q3. And we will also touch, Chair, on the transformation fund. And on the NEF mandate, Chair, just what I can say here is that the NEF, we are a provider of solutions for transformation and inclusive growth in the country. We seek to be a catalyst for broad-based Black economic empowerment and developing and promoting investments to support sustainable economic transformation. So, Chair, what this really talks to is about inclusive growth in the country. Knowing where South Africa comes from the legacy of apartheid, the country acknowledges, or the government acknowledges, that the society is unequal. And therefore, there is a need to put together measures that will ensure that there are opportunities created in order to address issues of substantive equality. So what we are saying here is that this is part of nation building and social cohesion. in order to ensure that everyone is able to enjoy the benefit and the growth of the economy in South Africa. We are addressing the issue of investments and the structural reforms within the economy. I'll talk into detail during the presentation as to how we actually doing this. And I also must add, Chair, I really enjoyed the recent discussion in Parliament around the issue of transformation, because this is really at the core of what we do as an organization. And it's important for these conversations to continue, Chair, and we would really welcome contributions from the members of the committee in terms of how best we could actually continue to implement and how best to ensure that we maximize the impact of transformation within the economy. I will not go into the visions and the missions, Chair, in the interest of time, but maybe talking about the priorities of the organization, linking that to the government priorities. So there are 3 pillars of that the government has actually put in place as its priorities, which is inclusive growth and job creation, the reduction of poverty and the cost of living, and building a capable state. And as an organization, we take cue from that government tone that has been set in structuring our strategy as well as our APP. And now going to the priorities of the cluster that the DTIC falls under, we also look at the priorities of the cluster, which is supporting catalytic sectors, stimulating investments and transformation, creating induced demand, and also dealing with the structural reforms. And as the DTIC family, there are 3 pillars that we are actually focusing on as part of the strategy. We call them the 3 Ds, being decarbonization, diversification, and digitalization. That filters through to the NEF's priorities, which is the creation of Black industrialization and aggregation. I will explain shortly what we mean by that as the NEF, and also supporting the green economy, the digital economy, supporting SMMEs, and also supporting transactions that contribute towards the natural and cultural beneficiation of South Africa's beauty. Looking at the priorities, Chair, of the cluster, just breaking it down into the numbers. As the NEF, what we've committed to do is to create 700,000 jobs over the MTF period. And we also committed to supporting subsistence farmers. So what we're saying here is that there are farmers, people who have been farming for years, that require the support in order to go to the next level so that they become commercial and they also grow within the economy. We support various SMMEs in different industries, and our commitment is to support 10,000 SMMEs. And we also commit to support investments of up to 100 billion rand. We'll talk about this in the context of the Transformation Fund and what we are seeking to do there. In terms of work experience, what we are saying that in addition to creating jobs for people who are experienced, there is a need for creating opportunities for the young people, particularly those that are graduating or recently acquiring qualifications who do not have experience. And as an organization, we're committing to support at least 45,000 of those people. And we will also be contributing about 5 billion rand towards exports. Red tape is one of the issues that we constantly focusing on reduction of as part of government. For instance, we've come up with an indicator that says, as an organization, we are committing that we will disperse funding towards transactions that we approve within 45 days from the dates that they get approved. What that does, Chair, is to ensure that we don't just account for approvals, we account for the funds flowing into the economy. Now, going into the particular KPIs and the specific targets that we have as an organization. So we've actually saying that over the 2024-25 financial year, in terms of what we call aggregated additional output, what we mean by that is that as we actually support investments, as we fund the investments, those investments, they need to ensure that they contribute towards outputs in terms of what they're contributing, in terms of their revenues and all the actual generation of capital within the economy. So we're saying in the current financial year, 4.5 billion rand, and that actually grows over the period to around 202 billion rand. And the same with the value of investments. We're committing to invest a minimum of 1.5 billion rand, growing up to 100 billion rand over the next 5 years. The issue of job creation, I'm going to talk in the next couple of slides as to how we are actually focusing on job creation, because this is one of the key issues in the country, the issue of unemployment. And we really need to put together active measures to ensure that we contribute towards the government efforts of creating jobs. So I will not go through each of those individually, Chair, but those are the targets that have been set by the organization in terms of the APP. This, Chair, is still a summary of what I talked about in the previous slide. But what we're seeking to show here is how we tactically deploying the resources. We are actually utilizing resources that we have as an organization currently, as well as the third-party funds that we've been raising over the years. And also, we believe that there is a need for government to increase the deployment of resources, which is why the issue of ensuring that we partner with other parties. So the issue of the transformation fund is a partnership between government and the private sector. Talk more about that later on. Then if I go to the specific programs as to how we are actually implementing them, we are continuing to implement the Black Industrialist Program. This is a program that has been going on for a number of years, working with the DTIC and the IDC. So as an organization, we continue to support transactions which are Black industrialist-led, and we actually start from early stages of projects, from the feasibility stages of projects, up to a stage where they qualify for the Black Industrialist Grant. And we also co-invest with the Black Industrialist Grants in those projects in order to ensure that we continue to have a pipeline of projects that are catalysts within the various sectors of the economy. The program of aggregation, what we are saying there is that it is important for the purposes of creating the markets, because funding is not the only challenge that entrepreneurs are facing in the economy. A lot of entrepreneurs have got good business ideas, but they don't have access to the markets. So what we are saying is that we are actually some of the big aggregators that we have supported. As an organization, we've got a number of those within our existing portfolio, where they will be supporting a lot of SMMEs that can benefit within their value chains, and then that can also grow to be supported by other entities. Also working with the private sector, we are partnering with established businesses. So in order to ensure that those businesses also create opportunities for entrepreneurs within their own businesses. We have received a lot of support from the market on this particular program. We're actually having partnerships with a number of companies. I think I must also say, Chair, as an organization, we believe that as a country, South Africa, both Black and white-owned businesses are going to have to work together to ensure that we deal with the challenges that the economy is facing in South Africa, including the issues of unemployment, particularly for the young people and the women, and also people living with disabilities. Chair, maybe if I can also touch on program number 6, I will not go through each one of them. That is really talking to the work that we are doing in actually supporting tourism projects, as well as projects within the cultural space, that is in the TV and the film space. South Africa is very well endowed when it comes to natural beauty, and we also have an opportunity to use the tourism sector. And that's one of those catalytic sectors that have been identified by the economic clusters, that it is a sector that will assist us in order to create jobs within the economy. Now, Chair, on this particular slide, we have included case studies as an annexure to the presentation. I will not be going through each one of them, Chair, but I will touch on a few of them just to give maybe context in terms of what we are saying when we're talking about these programs. If I can just, for instance, talk about this particular transactions, which is Busamed. Busamed is a hospital group that the NEF supported. We started supporting this particular project when the entrepreneur came to the NEF with 5 hospital licenses that were issued by the Department of Health. So they had actually been awarded these licenses, and they needed funding in order to commercialize them and build the hospitals. So we conducted a feasibility study as the NEF on those licenses, and we began to finance that particular project. The initial funding that we gave towards this business was 5 million rand. And they utilized that funding in order to secure the sites for the hospitals and also to do the initial work. There's a lot of compliance work and other work that needs to be done, particularly within the healthcare space, before you can actually start the business. When that work was successfully done, then as an organization, we were able to grant this particular entrepreneur another a 50 million rand loan in order to start breaking ground and building the hospital. And as an organization, we have thus far supported this business to the tune of 248 million rand. In fact, they have actually repaid about 100 million rand to the NEF. But what this has done, it has enabled them to actually access further funding from the private sector. We've got one of the commercial banks and other financiers in the business, and they've raised over 2.4 billion rand for this particular project. And it currently employs 1,167 people. And they've got hospitals across the country. There is one, a heart hospital, which is located in Strand in Cape Town. There is also an oncology hospital located in Modderfontein in Gauteng. And they have also then went on a strategy of acquiring other existing hospitals. So they have hospitals, there's hospital in Harrismith. They now own the eThekwini Hospital and the Gateway Hospital in KwaZulu-Natal, and also hospital in Mbombela in Mpumalanga. So what is happening, Chair, we have a group that is becoming a healthcare provider, and it's actually getting to a similar size as established healthcare groups, and they are continuing to grow. Initially, when they started, they really struggled, Chair. In fact, if we had not been patient with them, we could have given up in the first 2 years, because the first 2 hospitals could not break even. And I was very encouraged, Chair, that over the last couple of months, the Modderfontein Hospital, which was one of the initial ones, they actually reached occupancies of over 80% of their beds, which tells us that if we are going to be supporting industrialization and if we are going to be focusing on transformation, we have to actually ensure that we're patient with entrepreneurs and we actually support them even through the difficult times. And today, this is a good story because they even offer free medical services to their own employees. They are working with the Department of Health. They are even admitting patients who are not on medical aid schemes because they are actually assisting the government, which is, in our view, going to be one of the key groups that can assist the government in implementing the health provision solutions that the country is looking for. And then in terms of aggregation, what we mean here, if I'll use one of these examples here, being the Bosiami example. So what we're saying here, we funded a fresh produce market. I think initially when we did this, we felt that this was in the retail space. It's a fresh, almost like the markets that are available in places like Johannesburg and Tshwane for fresh produce. But this one is located in Limpopo, in Polokwane. And we funded it initially with 71 million rand. And it really showed us something because currently this business employs 300 people directly, and there are over 2,000 people that are supported through its activities. But now we've actually identified an opportunity for 60 emerging farmers. These farmers, they have been supporting this business for years, but on a subsistence level. So we are now assisting them to commercialize so that they also become bigger businesses or medium-sized within the economy. And they can also start supporting to other markets as well. And this is helping the Limpopo economy because this business was previously buying all its products in the Tshwane and the Johannesburg markets. But now it is creating a market for the farmers in Limpopo so that they don't necessarily need to be driving all the way with their products. And that product gets sent back there when it goes to be sold to the ultimate end users. So similar initiatives we are employing with the other programs. There are two others that are on that slide, but I will not talk to them. Now, moving, Chair, to the issue of the spaza shop, I do want to touch on this because this is one of those programs that government has announced that it's going to be rolling out. The NEF is working together with our shareholder ministry, being the DTIC, as well as the Department of Small Business Development in order to roll out the spaza shop support program. So what we are saying here is that we are actually going to be supporting these particular businesses in order to ensure that they can supply products that are actually accredited from accredited suppliers at competitive prices so that they can actually be competitive in a similar way like all the other stores that are actually doing well in those particular communities. But this time, ensuring that these are compliant. But maybe talking about this because the BB aggregation model here, which is on this slide, actually talks to that. What we did, we supported this BB group. It's actually in Puta Ditaba, in former Kwakwa in the Free State. And this one employs over 800 South Africans, and it's got distribution networks. And it actually has relationships with the manufacturers of goods. So it's able to provide the goods at the right prices and also the goods that are actually at the same level as the ones that are offered by the established retail markets. Now, what we've done, we've supported 50 entrepreneurs that will be supported through this particular initiative. They will be supported. We'll provide them with the infrastructure. We'll provide them with the stock that will be procured. at the right prices, and will provide them with a point of sales so that they are able to manage their capital, and we will then provide them with the required working capital. So we are saying that if we are going to be able to make a difference in these particular markets, we're going to have to make sure that we come up with comprehensive solutions. So that is a solution that we are working on in a particular area in the Free State. We have similar initiatives in various townships and rural areas. Obviously, every area has got different requirements or needs. So we are working with different partners that will ensure that we solve the problems that these particular communities are facing when it comes to this particular industry. Now, another area, maybe if I can just touch on it, Chair, the issue of global business services or the area of call centers. We are focusing on this, Chair, because we believe that this area has the opportunity to create employment, particularly for people, young people, as well as those people who are actually sitting at home who do not necessarily have experience. And this can assist us to create the opportunities in a short space of time. So we are working with GPS companies in order to establish more of these services, because South Africa is actually one of those sought after areas for the international market for these call centers. And the aim is to ensure that some of them are located within the townships and the rural areas, and we also create the jobs. So we're working with various partners to do that. The reason why we have some of them there, for instance, Itala, we work with them because they own a lot of properties in the townships in KZN. So we work with them purely in order to see how we can actually utilize some of their properties that are currently not being utilized, Chair, as well as other entities that are listed there. They are actually very active in the GPS services market, and they are really working with us to ensure that we can actually implement this particular initiative. On the NEF itself now, so this is looking at our own business. We are saying that in our own business, we are going to be appointing, we have started employing the first cohort of trainees. And the aim is that over the next year, we will actually be recruiting hundreds unemployed graduates to place them within the NEF, as well as some of the investee companies that we are working with. So we saw this as a low-hanging fruit because the opportunities were existing there, and we already had partnerships with the SETAs that actually have resources to pay some of the stipends that are required for these young people. And when we did this, Chair, over the last 2 years, we hired about 100 people, and over 87 of them have now managed to secure permanent employment in other companies. So we see that when we open doors for young people, give them the initial training, then that actually puts them in good stead to be able to secure employment elsewhere in a short space of time. So this is assisting in dealing with the skills challenge that the country is facing. We are speaking to the National Skills Fund in order to see if we can actually increase this number, because we can have significant numbers of training programs or of supporting these unemployed graduates, Chair, because of the networks that we have and the partners that we have through a program that we can manage that will open doors for young people. Now, coming to the actual performance. So this was, I'm not going to focus on this. This was the performance as at the end of Q3. We've been tracking all our KPIs. The reds are the ones that we have not actually achieved. So this is showing the quarterly targets over the period of time. And this is was the performance in Q3. So our performance has been improving over the year, But maybe in order to just contextualize the issue of performance, I'm going to speak to it in the context of this particular slide, because this is where we are now, I think, as of the last week, as we go to the final week. So what is happening is that in terms of, for instance, the number of the funded SMMEs, I think we are very encouraged there, because we've actually met that target. We are finalizing the numbers to see by how much we will do over and above the 150 number of SMMEs. So we're very encouraged that we've supported that number this year. And the aim is to keep increasing these numbers over the years, Chair. And then the value of investments as well, we are actually tracking well there in terms of what we are doing. We are now actually close to the 1.2 billion, and we actually focusing, in fact, as we're sitting here, the number of committees that are finalizing certain approvals that will be finalized over the next couple of days. So we'll be able to see the final numbers by the end of this month. And also in terms of the percentage of agribusinesses, that one as well, I believe that with the pipelines that we're working on this week, we will be able to meet and exceed that particular KPI. So we are tracking well, Chair, in terms of performance, in terms of the KPIs. If I can touch on the job opportunities one, because that one there, if you look at it, we had committed to do 10,500, and we were at the last count sitting at around 1,800. That is concerning if you're looking at it in terms of the numbers, but at that time, we had a lot of projects that we knew were actually in the final stages. And as at last week, we had managed to finalize projects that would give us at least that minimum of 10,000 jobs. So we are actually aiming to meet, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to exceed that target. Because for us, as an organization, as I said, job creation is critical. We are actually focusing on projects that will give us immediate jobs. We want immediate employment. So the projects that we have already supported that are expanding, they are giving us more numbers of jobs, as well as the low-hanging fruit projects that we are actually focusing on. Because the tactic or the strategy that we have adopted in this particular year is to focus on projects that actually give us jobs at a cost-effective manner. So jobs that are not giving us very high cost for jobs. We are focusing on those projects because we're seeing, for instance, on the manufacturing side, that is the challenge that can arise. So we are managing that very carefully to ensure that we utilize our resources efficiently in order to make sure that we achieve the targets. So I will not maybe talk much on this particular slide, safe to say that we are actually tracking well on the targets, and we're meeting all these particular targets. One of the issues that I know is a concern for government when it comes to financial performance is that issue of collections as well as the impairments. You will see that in terms of our collection ratios, we are collecting 80% of the installments that we issue out as an organization, which we believe, Chair, is a good indicator, because it says to us a lot of our clients are able to service their loans, and we are able to get back the funding that we are actually investing. And also we are able to ensure that we focus on development projects, because some of the projects we are not collecting on are projects where we've provided the clients payment reprieve in order to focus on development. And there is also a certain percentage where the clients are not performing. And in terms of impairments as well, we are actually watching that very closely, Chair. We we are actually sitting at around 27% of impairments. And we continue to work with the clients that are actually in difficulties to ensure that we work on turnarounds and they constantly improve in terms of their performance in order to ensure that we support sustainable businesses, because that is the key. The support that we provide is towards businesses, Chair, and we want to ensure that they become sustainable within the economy. And lastly, Chair, maybe let me touch on the transformation fund. So the minister did announce the publication of the concept paper for the transformation fund, which we believe was a very important milestone in the process of conceptualization of this fund. And what, Chair, we would like to say to the committee is that we do want to invite the members of the committee to review that particular document and provide inputs. We are working with the DTIC on that particular document. We are at consultation stage at the moment, and we will be having a number of sessions with various stakeholders where we will be actually getting inputs in terms of the concept that the government has published, so that at the end of the day, what is finalized as the transformation fund for South Africa is something that has been actually crafted in consideration of inputs of all the stakeholders. The aim here is to ensure that we come up with an initiative that will assist the country to grow the economy and also to transform. So we are saying that all citizens of South Africa need to work together in order to come up with a solution that will help all of us for future generations, to ensure that our children and also the generations to come, they don't experience the same levels of inequalities that we have seen historically. And Chair, this is something that we believe that it is critical in the country. It's critical for the nation, for the unity of the country, and also for the peace in our society, because we do need to make sure that the initiatives that we put in place to support the unemployed, as well as those who actually are poor, are actually initiatives that are actually led by the government, and they actually talk to what the government is committed to do. One of the pillars of the government action in this current administration is transformation. And this is one of those things that is actually putting this into action. So maybe coming back to the process, Chair, we are in the consultation stage for this, and we also are working with technical support. We actually going to be working with advisors that are very much reputable in the markets, as well as people who actually are knowledgeable in this space. And we're going to be inviting people from the private sector to be part of this. So this is not something that will be done by government in secret. It's going to be done openly, and it's actually going to involve everyone in the country. And the aim is to make sure that we actually provide the required support in order to ensure that the government can execute the transformation objectives that it had. We will focus on townships and rural areas. We will focus on supporting the productive sectors of the economy. And we will also, in terms of the approach, be taking inputs from the consultation process that is currently underway. So I want to thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity to present. That's the end.
Thank you very much, CEO, for the presentation, quite detailed. Can I see if there is an appetite to engage with the presentation?
Mr. Mndluli's Chair and Mr. Chance.
Okay, Mr. Mdluli and Mr. Chance.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a few questions here. So I'll start with the first one. So the NEF has targeted 8,400 jobs by Q3, but only achieved 1,298, a shortfall of over 7,000 jobs. What is driving this massive underperformance, and how will the NEF recover? That's the first one, Chair. And the second one is the NEF planned to invest 1.5 billion in 2024-2025, but by Q3 it had only done 633.9 million has been achieved. Therefore, what specific challenges have prevented the full investment, and what corrective actions are in place to meet the target by year end? The other question, Chair, that I have is that the NEF seems to have committed funding of 10,000. It's committed funding for 10,000 SMEs over 5 years, but has only managed to fund 104 SMEs in Q3. Given the slow progress, does the NEF believe that its targets are realistic? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Chance.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the background noise. I am actually in a vehicle, although I can assure you I'm not at the wheel. Thank you to Mr. Daimani for the presentation. I do have a few questions. The first is, can he please give us his views on the recently released funding white paper, gazetted by the Minister of Small Business Development, which is the result of a cabinet-approved process over a couple of years to look at the constraints to funding of SMEs and cooperatives in the South African economy, and what lessons have been learned from that process in terms of the plan to form the Transformation Fund. Then there's a dramatic increase in the numbers that he presented. 4.5 billion of aggregated output 24-25 financial year, up to 72 billion in each of the 27, 28, 29 financial years. And that then raises the question in my mind of the capacity of the NEF to actually manage this staggering growth. And which then leads to the question of what is the plan of the NEF to fund manage either through wholesale or retail channels. In other words, how much of the funding does it intend to disperse and manage itself? And how much of it does it intend to manage through third parties? Because massive growth like this presents huge organizational risks, and I'd just like to get some information on how that is going to be managed. The impairment rate is also a big concern, and if we look at the impairment rate of the Small Enterprise Development Finance Agency, it's sitting at around 61%. And I'm just very concerned that if the massive increase in funding that is going to be managed by the NEF through various channels, including the Transformation Fund, it will not maintain control of its own impairment targets and find itself in the same dire straits as the Small Enterprise Development Finance Agency. And of course, the other thing, of course, and I'm not going to go into the Transformation Fund in detail because there will be time to do that before the deadline of the 7th of May. But of course, this whole plan does require or does depend upon the private sector coming to the party in a big way. And time will tell whether that is actually a realistic expectation. One thing that is missing from this presentation is the income statement and balance sheet of the NEF itself. We don't really know what is its financial status. We know that it's been basically undercapitalized for many, many years, and that obviously has led to some strains, but would be important, I think, for this committee to see the financials of the organization itself. And then, just as a matter of interest, I was looking at the table of some of the black industrialist beneficiaries, and there were two that stood out. One of which was Mbali Fuels. The other one was a business, I think, in Kumazi Cotton Gin, and the fuels business was based in Bothaville Free State, and the other one was based in Mpumalanga. And I went into the CIPC database, and I found that the Mbeli Fuels business only has one shareholder. It's a white man, and its two businesses, its two founders were both white men. And yet it's listed in the Black Industrialist Program, and it's planning on creating 13,000 jobs. So it also then said that there was an empowerment partner, which was a Free State listed organization, not listed, but Free State organization, but it didn't have any details. So I'd like to just get some insights from Mr. Daimani as to how you classify a black industrialist. Is it just a matter of the shareholding? Or is it a matter of who is actually behind the business? Because this business is definitely not a black industrialist, from what I can see. Yeah, I think that's about all for now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think on my side, we note that there are 7 areas in your KPIs that were not achieved for a variety of reasons. For instance, I think Member Mdluli has already touched on one on the investment, and you have an explanation, the 1.2 billion investment, and then you are currently sitting at about 633.9 million. There's others which I can send because I was trying to save time, but there's 7 areas where there has not been a performance on the side of the NEF. The second thing is on the capitalization that has been raised by Member Chance. We did, as a portfolio committee, try to facilitate the engagement between the chairperson of the board of the IDC and the chairperson of NEF. If you could update us in terms of whether or not, because there was an undertaking at that point, this was like 6 months ago or so, there was an undertaking from the IDC that it was going to intervene. Would like to get a briefing with regard to that area. And then the third area is on the document itself, the proposal from the ministry and yourselves. Would like an opportunity as the portfolio committee to thoroughly engage it. We recently had an engagement with a startup group, which is a concept that is lobbying for a policy. We have found that these are the high-end innovators, not necessarily startup as we know it, which have not found space. And I want to believe that having looked into the profile and the work they do, that perhaps we might need to include them as that category in the funding, and we can provide some of the founding documentations from them, which can be very helpful as your drafters are working on it, and ourselves too we should be able to make an input with regard to all those issues that we think are critical, so that you can, at least on our side, have a green light on our side with regard to the documentation. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you very much, Chair. My colleague Andile will come in some of the questions, but maybe let me deal with some of them. If I may start with the Mabele Fuels one that was raised by Member Chance. So Mabele Fuels, indeed, if you look on it on CIPC, it will reflect those 2 shareholders. So what has happened here is that, as I said, when we start projects, we start with feasibility studies. We undertook feasibility studies, and they were conducted in what is termed as unincorporated joint venture. So in the Mabele joint venture. And what happens is when the study is completed, then the business of that joint venture gets moved to a company. But the partners in the joint venture enter into an agreement that certain of the partners must go and incorporate the company. So you will not have all the partners being reflected as directors on day one. That's the first point I want to make there. Number 2, what has happened, actually, maybe if I can give a brief update to the committee on that project. That project has actually, over the last month, concluded financial raising. It's raised almost 2 billion rand from a commercial bank and also from other DFIs. And the NEF actually started the project with their own feasibility studies and developed it to a stage where it is now. There are definitely black shareholders in that particular. It is a black industrialist project, so it's definitely, that is something that will be reflected at CIPC at the time when the project moves its business from the joint venture into the company. So there's a difference between the project development, where it's developed, and what you would see on CIPC. That does not necessarily mean that the Mabele Fuels project that we're talking about is that company, but there's definitely a link between the two. So we can provide the information to the committee just to show where it is now and also what is actually the current shareholding, to actually show that it definitely does have active black shareholders. Now, when it comes to Chair, maybe if I can touch on the issue of the capacitation that you raised with the IDC. So there have been conversations between NEF and IDC with the assistance of the DTIC. In fact, there is a steering committee that has been set up to look at that issue. It's set actually last night once again. So there is definitely progress that's being made there, Chair, and then we can keep the committee updated as to where it is. We have not yet finalized that process, but there's definitely progress that is being made, and there is commitment, Chair, from the IDC's side in order to make sure that it actually looks into assisting. So, Chair, that's definitely something that is on the go. On the issue of the group would definitely welcome the opportunity to engage the committee on the fund. And also, Chair, we will be following up with the committee to get the details of the group that you mentioned that has got some information that could be useful. And maybe we can actually get them involved in the process as well. Would really appreciate that, because we want to work with all the partners that actually have ideas that will help us to improve in terms of what we are working on. And then maybe going back to Member Mdluli's questions, Chair, on the issue of the job. Indeed, if you're looking at where we are on the particular, I'm sure Andile will actually, because this is something that he watches on a daily basis. As at the time when we submitted the initial presentation, this is how the picture looked like. But maybe let me not go into details. Andile will give you the exact details now of where we are. But we've actually, over the year, because this is something that we work on, that's the nature of deal flow, Chair. Because what the DTIC and the government impressed upon us is that when we report, we should not report on progress or things that have been approved, that we were in the process of closing. We must only report on actuals. There are things that have become actuals over the last month or so that have actually, we've been working on them throughout the year. Views on the funding white paper, Chair. We definitely are in alignment with what the white paper is saying, and we agree with the information that it contains. If you look at the state of the SMMEs in the country and the challenges that they face, I think that white paper, it actually stipulates that information very clearly, and it's things that we were aware of and we are aligned on. We are definitely working with the Department of Small Businesses in actually looking at the issue of SMMEs. And in terms of how we are providing solutions as well, we ensure that it's solutions that will actually ensure that we're able to tackle the real challenges that SMMEs are facing, which is why I mentioned earlier about the strategies that we are implementing, when we talk about aggregations, when we talk about creating markets, and we talk about funding and also the skills of the SMMEs in the country, because we also agree that the SMME sector is going to be one of the keys for government to create jobs for the economy. So we definitely aligned with what is contained in that white paper. And what we are saying when it comes to this is that the needs in the country are just too big. They are vast. There is no one entity that can say it can service the country. And this talks to the question that Member Chance was raising around us working with other funders and other partners in ensuring that we achieve the objectives. We need more partners in order to achieve this. But what we are saying is that there is a need for a concerted effort, and we're going to have bold objectives as government. And when we set ourselves targets, we have to be bold. And if we are going to be setting small targets, we are not going to, we'll clap hands for ourselves for achieving that small targets, whereas the country has serious needs. And the government has acknowledged that we need to come up with measures that will ensure that we come up with aggressive plan to achieve the plans of government when it comes to the youth unemployment, when it comes to unemployment in general, and also dealing with the issue of fighting poverty. So at this stage, we have not yet finalized the approach when it comes to the management of the fund, the transformation fund. But definitely, if we talk about the principle, I fully agree with what you are saying, Mr. Chance, to say we're going to work with partners that will assist. There are a number of partners that are currently managing funds, and some of them, they are doing it very well. And we are saying they must continue. And what we're saying is that when we've managed to pool resources together, these resources, we will enter into agreements where we work with people that will achieve similar objectives that government seeks to achieve. I think there's one thing that I think government agrees on, is that there is a crisis in the country when it comes to unemployment. And also the issue of transformation is an urgent issue. If not addressed, it is going to cause challenges in the country. And the question that we need to answer is, how do we do that? How do we work together? How do we actually work with all the partners that actually see the similar challenges, that want to achieve the same objectives? So definitely, we will be working with other partners, including the private sector and other third parties. I think here this calls for everyone's hands to be on deck. But my view is that everyone needs to be aligned in terms of what we seek to achieve through the initiatives that government is putting in place. Andile, you can come in.
Thank you, CEO. Good morning, Chair and members of the Portfolio Committee. With respect to the jobs target, Mr. Mluli, I think we are currently in the final stages of the paperwork for the Support of One business that is currently supporting about 6,000 jobs and will create a further 9,000 in the next 12 to 24 month period. So just on that already, we're estimating that we will be sitting quite comfortably at around 13,000 jobs supported or created for this financial year. The second business, ironically enough, that we were expecting to be closed by this year was the Mobile Fuels financial close, which also had another 14,000 new jobs impact, but that's likely only to be effected during the course of next year. So whilst we are behind currently, and I mean, to give a bit of context, when the seventh administration came in, that step change in expectations, impressed upon us the need to be optimistic and rather solve for the problems we have as opposed to solve for the capacity that we currently are looking at as the NEF. And therefore, we looked at what our record has been, and we believe we have the ability of enacting a jobs impact of around 1 job for every 150,000 Rand that we spend as the NEF in supporting businesses. And that's why we are thinking it will be growing to the levels that we hope it will grow over the next 5 years as the transformation fund comes into effect. With respect to the concerns around, I think, the impairment rates going forward and this transformation fund, it will be a fine balancing act, if I can call it that, Mr. Chance. I mean, there's a number of reasons that, you know, the different impairment rates across the different entities are impacted. But we've taken the view before we even enact or operationalize the transformation fund that our portfolio management work now becomes more proactive as opposed to being reactive. So the idea is implementing upfront at the point of approval value enhancement plans that will add and aid in the sustainability of businesses. And we're hoping that that will lead to more sustainability across the portfolio as the growth happens. The other thing is that we have to rely very heavily on, call it technology-based solutions that will enable us to be a lot more agile as we monitor and help these businesses go from their infancy stage to, you know, very effective businesses. And Chairperson Masina, I think around those KPIs we're currently lagging behind on. Once again, our hope is that at least 13 of the 16 will be met by the time we close. But we are pushing very. We will be pushing very hard to close in the gap on all our KPIs as far as possible. Like I said, the real impact has been the mid-year, call it, change of how we are targeting and really pushing for more impact as opposed to pushing for what is within our limits. Yeah, I think that covers the balance of the questions, Chair, that I noted. Thank you.
Maybe, Chair, just maybe lastly, there's one other issue that Mr. Chance raised, the issue of the income statement and the balance sheet. Chair, they are in the APP document, but we can definitely extract them and then maybe submit them separately to the committee. Apologies for not having them in the actual slide.
Okay. No, that's fine. Is there any follow-up, Member Chance and Member Mdluli? Oh, we're fine. Okay. I think we are fine. Thank you very much. We'll obviously await the financials, and then you will indicate to the team when I would like to get the briefing when you are ready. You don't have to rush. With regard to the ongoing discussion of the recapitalization between yourself and NEF, you will come back to us when you are ready so that we can line it up as one of the issues of interest that we would like to put into our program. Otherwise, I think that's sufficient. Thank you very much. Andre, do we have any announcement?
Sorry, Chair, I do have a follow-up question, if I may. Mr. Chance
sorry.
here.
Yes, Mr. Chance. You can come through, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just two things. The first is the assumptions upon which these growth projections are made. If one looks at the macroeconomic projections through by Treasury in terms of our economic growth rate, which currently sits at 0.6%, projected to rise maybe by 1 or 2% in the medium term. There is clearly a link between economic growth and job creation in this country and any other country. And is it realistic to expect 4 million jobs to be created in the next 5 years with growth rates of only 1 to maybe 3% max projected by Treasury, of which 700,000 are projected to grow, resulting from your interventions at a cost of 150,000 Rand a job. I just would like, to get your comment. Have you actually done the macroeconomic analysis around that in partnership with Treasury to look at whether it's realistic that those job projections can materialize? And I have to say that everybody realizes that going back to the National Development Plan, projections over many, many years have never been met. Unemployment continues to rise. What is fundamentally going to change that picture in the economy? What are the things that, from a supply and demand perspective, are going to change the picture of dismal job growth? Then, coming back to Mabele Fuels, I'd like to get some detail on those jobs, the 13,000 jobs. What are those jobs? What are people going to be doing? It's a biofuels company, which essentially is taking crops and turning it into ethanol. Are those crops not being grown at the moment? And are the crops not being used for food? In other words, are the 13,000 new jobs going to be from new agricultural workers or farm workers, or what are these people going to be doing? Are they going to be managing the machinery? I'd just like some more information, because sometimes these job projections are sort of picked out of thin air, and actually, are they real jobs, new jobs, or sustained jobs? What sort of jobs? Thank you, Chair.
Over to you, CEO.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Chair, the total job numbers, the 4 million jobs, those are the targets for the cluster. Those were not NEF targets. And I think as the DTIC family, we've actually been looking into this and actually seeing each entity, looking at what is its contribution. So I can't speak for the cluster as to that number. What I can speak to is the NEF's contribution that we've put there, which is 700,000, which is something that we definitely worked on, and we looked at our own assumptions and what we can do as an organization. And then we actually came up with a number. It's definitely something that we believe is achievable. But as I said, these initiatives and all of these actions that need to be done in order to do this, they are aggressive and they require bold action. And with the current unemployment situation in the country, it calls for that. We have to come up with bold initiatives and bold actions that actually give us the numbers. And it also touches to the issue that, Member Charles, the second one about Mabele Fuels. We will definitely, Chair, be submitting a document as part of the information we'll submit on Mabele Fuels, and also touching on this issue of job creation. This is definitely, the numbers are going to come on the primary agriculture side. And this program is using Project Sorghum as a feedstock, which is something that in the country, if you know, in South Africa, it's something that South Africa used to grow. It used to be big in, but not anymore. And the reason why that feedstock was chosen, it's because it does not actually threaten food security, because in similar projects, other people use maize as a feedstock. So here, this is an opportunity to actually work with the farmers that have got the experience, they've grown sorghum before, and then we can work with them to actually create the employment. So the one thing with South Africa is that there is potential for job creation, and there are industries that South Africa used to be big in, that if we focus on reviving them, we should be able to get significant job numbers. But we'll definitely be putting that into the response to give more information on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you fine, Member Chance?
Yes, I'm covered. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. No problem. Thank you very much. I think we are fine. Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any announcements, Andre?
Chair, just that we are meeting next week, Tuesday the 1st in M46 with a joint meeting with the Portfolio Committee on Transport, Chair. So we will send out notification as well to members. That's the only announcement from our side. And we may consider physical meeting, Chair, and we may consider 2 reports subject to our information from the DTIC that we're still waiting for, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. So have the airline confirmed?
I've just spoken to the DOT chief officials. They will confirm with me, Chair, but as what we've received thus far was an apology from the minister that she will not be in attendance, but the others may be. So I just wanted from them the confirmation, and I'm waiting for that, Chair, but I can't see it not happening, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. The meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.